For more on this topic, I want to bring in Delano Squires now. He is a research fellow at the Heritage Foundation, and he joins us on the phone. Delano, always so great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
There is an assumption that is in politics that people will vote for someone on the basis of their shared skin color. But do you think that's changing?
Well, I don't agree with the premise. I think it's somewhat oversimplified. This typically is applied most frequently to black voters. Yeah. I heard it a lot in 2008. People say, oh, you're voting for Obama just because he's black. While I think that there may be different enthusiasm, a different level of enthusiasm when a person feels they can personally identify with a particular candidate, black voters have voted basically 85+% for a Democratic candidate, I don't know, for every election that anyone under 40 years old can remember.
Yeah.
So close to 90% for Biden, and he's as old, white, and male as you can get. Right. So I don't think it's just an issue of, oh, Kamala's black, so I'm going to vote for her. I think particularly for black women, whoever the Democratic nominee would be, they would get a lion's share of the black vote.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. What's interesting right now is that, and I've been saying, is that Kamala Harris and the quest for a running mate for their campaign, they seem to be of the opinion that it can't be anybody but a white guy. And they're pretty explicit about that. You see, I've read a lot of coverage, and they're like, well, America's not going to go for any other arrangement. It has to be a white man. And I think built into that assumption is a fundamental contempt for the voters, that the voters are so low IQ and so intrinsically focused on things like race and gender that they can't see past it.
I understand your position. I feel like we are in a very delicate space in terms of our political culture, and particularly the pundit class. Yeah. We have had people, particularly on the left, who have been so, this is, the cast on MSNBC is not a Mensa meeting. I'll just put it that way, right? So everything that they talk about has to be boiled down to race and gender. And I do think it is prime voters in a particular way where, and I'm going to give a bipartisan smack here. Mm-hmm. When people on the left see a white man who gets a job, they say, oh, it's because of his whiteness and white privilege. Mm-hmm. And then oftentimes when people on the right see a non-white male who gets a job, they say it's because of wokeness and DEI. Mm-hmm. I think both of them are overly simplistic. Do I think that biography matters when people are thinking about who to vote for, or when a principal is thinking about who to choose as a running mate? Yes, I do. The question is it a footnote or is it a headline? I think for the left, they tend to take the headline approach, and that's why it's the first thing they talk about. It's, and that's how Joe Biden sort of built how he was going to look for a running mate. At first it was a woman, and he said a black woman.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean that it's unimportant. And I've seen the same things where people are saying it needs to be a white man, and I understand that perspective from the left. But it's interesting that they're basically making the same DEI argument that the right makes, but for a straight white male, which is probably one of the first times that's ever happened in the history of American politics.
But it's a real disservice to whoever ends up getting picked too, because it suggests that it was their immutable characteristics that were more important to their competence.
Can I respond to that really quick? Because I think you put your thumb on the most important issue when it comes to DEI, and I think, again, our discourse around diversity has been dishonest to some respect. When I think about the group that should be criticized most, or the person should be criticized most when it comes to a quote unquote DEI hire, it's the individual or the institution that signals to the public, I am hiring someone based on some immutable characteristic.
Yes.
And the reason that they do that is to be able to benefit from the virtue that they feel they will accumulate by making that signal. So Joe Biden, who again, the left had their own sort of diversity play because they thought Republicans have their all white man. We need our own. So they hopped over Harris, Warren, Klobuchar, Booker, Castro, and they said, we're going to go with Joe Biden. Mm-hmm. And Joe Biden could have still picked Kamala Harris, who sitting U.S. Senator, former AG, former district attorney, on paper has the qualifications that you would expect from a vice presidential candidate. But he didn't do that. He could have fought it and just picked her and said she's the best woman for the job. But instead, he wanted to announce it so he could benefit from it. And then, and this always happens to people who come in under these circumstances, he ends up attaching an identity stigma to her.
Well, he's doing the same thing.
Having to fight off.
He's been doing that very same thing to this very day with Ketanji Brown Jackson. He just this past
Correct.
week, he did the same exact thing. He said, I chose her because she's a black woman. We put a black woman on the Supreme Court. And put that in combination with the fact that she sits before Congress and does that testimony where she pretends she doesn't know the difference between men and women. And it starts to create, whether you intend it or not, this impression that, like, this is very jacked up, this entire arrangement.
Yeah, and I agree. And I wish people wouldn't do it, to be fair. And again, let's speak bipartisanly. President Trump announced that when he was going to fill his last Supreme Court seat, he said it's going to be a woman. And we got Amy Coney Barrett, right? Now, The thing is it possible to get the best candidate when screening for qualifications that are not germane to the job? Sure. If I said I want to start a basketball team, but I needed a guy who was born in Brooklyn, grew up in North Carolina, went to the University of North Carolina, and prefers to wear the number 23, I could still end up with Michael Jordan. It's just not a wise way to do your screening, and especially when you do it for your own benefit. And this is what institutions, colleges, and other institutions do. And Justice Clarence Thomas noted this in his dissent in the Grutter versus Bollinger case in the early 2000s, when he smacked the University of Michigan on the hand by saying they're doing this for their own benefit, not for the benefit of the students who get admitted under these affirmative action policies. Right.
And not for the benefit of the institution. It's just really a very selfish act. Let's go to what else, how Kamala Harris is conducting her presidential campaign. I think it's interesting and telling that one of the first events she did this week was to film a video with the cast of RuPaul's Drag Race and encouraging people to vote using that forum. It's definitely unconventional. You don't usually expect a presidential campaign to come out and to campaign with drag queens in the very first week of their campaign. What, if anything, does that tell you about her candidacy?
What it should tell every voter is that this is not your daddy's Democrats. The national party, I'm talking about Democrats on a national level, not local level, is not the party of big labor. It's not the party of trade unions. It's not the party of higher wages. It is the party of CAP, of climate, abortion, and pride. Those are their three highest priorities, with abortion and pride being the two highest. And the way sort of that I draw a parallel, I think of a business that has both products that they sell and expenses that they're willing to incur in order to sell those products. For Democrats, they are willing to, quote unquote, incur the expense of race, of labor, of healthcare, of the things that people think about when they think about the Democratic Party. But what they sell is abortion and pride. That is what they're selling to voters. And so I wasn't surprised at all that she went there. She had drag queens at her residence over at one point. It might have been 2023, either 2023 or 2022. She had the guys from Queer Eye for the Straight Guy at the White House the other day, and one of the guys was in a full-length dress. So this is what the left is interested in. All the hand waving about the black community and black men, we're here for you, we hear you, even for black women, is a smokescreen, because when it comes to politics today, pride is the new black. And this is why she goes to that particular constituency first.
A couple quick questions for you, Delano. One, you said you used the acronym CAP, climate, abortion, pride. If I'm not mistaken, CAP is also a Gen Z expression for lying. When you're capping.
That is true.
Did you intend to make those two things the same thing?
It worked out perfectly in that sense, but yes. Okay,
I was just wondering. The other piece here is I wonder, is this a radical decision on her part? So if you're campaigning with RuPaul's Drag Race, is that a signal that she is just going to be hyper left wing, or has the mainstream moved so much that she's speaking to a big audience?
I think the latter. what she's doing now is not particularly radical. Again, Joe Biden, who again is octogenarian at this point, had Dylan Mulvaney, the grown man, who believes that he's transitioned into a girl. Joe Biden had this person at the White House for a forum on, quote unquote, trans issues. So I think this is a reflection of where the modern left is. So it doesn't even make her particularly radical. In today's Democratic Party, and we can put this to the test when they have their convention next month, I can't think of a single speaker that they will have next month who would or could publicly affirm in that particular venue that they believe marriage is between one man and one woman, that they believe that sex is binary, right? There's only males and females and switching is not allowed, and that they believe in the sanctity of all life. I can't think of a single person, either in Congress, in the House, in the Senate, or any of their sort of spokespeople or allies that they would invite up. So I just think it's a reflection of where the party has gone, and to them, it doesn't even seem radical.
Yes.
Because the modern leftist constituency is all about superficial identities, not about differences in ideas.
And it's all changed so quickly, because I'm pretty sure Barack Obama had all of the positions that you are no longer allowed to say.
Correct. He certainly did, when he was in the Illinois State Senate and even early on in his presidency. But that just goes to show you just how quickly things change. But again, just think of it like, Vince, over the last couple of weeks, I've been to a couple of different conferences, one for national conservatives, the other for social conservatives.
Yep.
And on the right, you have a diversity of ideas. Again, you have those two groups. You have, you have fiscal conservatives, you have neocons, you have, good government sort of technocrats and reformers. So you have a diversity of ideas. On the left, what you have is a diversity of faces, but everyone has to think the same thing. So for the left, diversity means everyone has the same idea, but you can have it put forward to you in a different package. And that to me is not really true diversity, and it's not the type of diversity that improves policymaking.
And one last thing, on the right, I've noticed, and you can see it especially in Trump's support, that there is diversity of ideas, but also increasingly there's actually diversity of faces.
Yes, and I think we'll see more of that. I predict that Trump will get at least 25% of the black male vote. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying women, I'm not saying overall, but particularly for black men. And I know what will happen if that takes place and he wins he has a narrow victory that can be attributed to that increase. Black men are going to be talked about and slandered publicly the same way white women, the 53% of white women who voted for Trump in 2016 were. And I hope black men, whether they are conservative or sort of former Democrats, are prepared for that type of onslaught.
Yes.
Many of them will try to deny and back away from it, but I actually welcome it because there are certain difficult conversations that need to be had on these issues. And I think that this election is the perfect catalyst.
Yeah, lean in, baby. All right. Thank you very much. Delano Squires from the Heritage Foundation. Good to talk to you, sir.